Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this Sunday, October the 4th, 2015. I'm David Knight, your host. I'm back from covering the martial law events that we had in the Northeast. I was gone last week. I had to take a little bit of time and decompress after that depressing situation. We covered what the politics of what the Pope was selling. We covered the martial law there. And I have to say, it just kept getting worse. It wasn't the amount of time that we were there, but it was what we saw in Philadelphia. My wife had told me that it was going to be much worse in Philadelphia. And I said, oh, they all like to brag about what a giant martial law presence they're going to create. But they shut down that entire city. And the saddest thing is the people loved it. They were just reveling in how safe they were. You have to understand that the TSA was not there to keep them safe. The TSA was there to keep them away from the Pope, away from one man, there to protect one man, there to protect a government official, if you will, from another country. And of course, it's amazing to see in Washington and in New York, where they have the president and the Congress all the time, or the UN, where they had leaders of all these different countries, how they stepped up the protection in the wake of the Pope being there. So we're going to talk about some of what we saw, some of the politics that was there. And we had an amazing interview with some people who were part of a network of those who had been abused by priests. And I want you to hear what they have to say. But of course, the big stories that we're going to be talking about are the shootings that happened at the end of the week and the reactions to those. We have CNN turning this into a white shooter. Even though he's mixed race, we have a story that's up on the Drudge Report, an InfoWars story. CNN turns mixed race Oregon shooter into a white man, and the LA Times is claiming that he was a white supremacist. We're going to talk about the motivations and the way they're turning this, again, yet another story that they're using for divide and conquer. And of course, the media is spinning this back and saying we have a war. That's one of the comments of the man who was the father of the newspaper reporter in Virginia. As part of that shooting, he says there's a war going on. Yes, there's a war at multiple levels. There is a political war. There is a racial war. There is a divide and conquer that is being pushed by the president, by the media, and that's not being talked about. We're going to have the reactions, though, of various candidates. One of the reactions of candidates, Joe Biden, and let's be honest, Joe Biden is running for president. That's been admitted. He hasn't made the official announcement. He's still, I would say, Joe Biden his time, but he started making comparisons when he talked about the Second Amendment. He says you don't have a right to have fighter jets. Well, we're going to talk about what the man who has control of the fighter jets has been doing. Just as we had this shooter in Oregon attack 9 people because they were Christians, Obama attacked a hospital because they had some Taliban patients there. He continued the attack for over a half hour after the Doctors Without Borders had alerted them. Of course, they knew where that hospital was. They knew that they were treating people of all different types. You don't attack hospitals. You don't attack Red Cross vehicles. You don't shoot medics. Those are called war crimes. There's international laws against that. So we've got a president who killed 19 at a hospital that he attacked. So we're going to talk about that. Don't lecture us on Second Amendment issues when you are using fighter jets to attack hospitals. You are a war criminal for doing that. I'm not the only one saying that. The UN is saying that. The Doctors Without Borders are saying that. They knew that hospital they had notified them back at the end of September, and they contacted them, and the attack continued for 30 minutes. We're also going to talk about what this back and forth in Syria is showing us about the real intentions of the United States in Syria and the use of these Islamic jihadi terrorists as surrogates for American foreign policy. Stay with us. We're going to have a report from Alex Jones when we come back. He's going to talk about the liberal sacraments of the left.
Ladies and gentlemen, Alex Jones here with breaking news and information, reporting for Infowars.com. Now, as you know, a few days ago in Oregon, there was another tragic shooting, 10 people dead. The man who shot and killed at least 10 people on Thursday openly asked people if they were Christians, just like Columbine, and if they said yes and wouldn't recant their faith, killed them. But there is almost no corporate mainstream media reporting on that fact. It's buried in local newspapers. Imagine if someone went in and asked if they were, quote, gay, and then shot them if they were. You would have guilt being projected onto all libertarians, all conservatives, all Christians, as if we had committed the crime. But instead, it's being covered up. Just like the racist, crazy black guy shooting the white reporters. And then that got swept under the rug. This is all part of the larger social engineering. But in a chilling development, President Obama, in multiple speeches, has said, we need to look at solutions, not just more legislation, but solutions like Australia and the UK had. Well, those solutions in the 90s were total gun confiscation. In fact, the real Crocodile Dundee, this was in the NRA magazine over a decade ago, the real Crocodile Dundee that the movie was based on, famous trapper, famous outdoorsman, refused to turn in his guns, and the police came and killed him in his home. He shot 3 of them. But this is where gun confiscation goes, is into firefights. And this is the type of civil war they want to start. They project this guilt onto gun owners for mass shootings that kill 167 people a year on average. 167 people out of 330 million people. It's one of the rarest forms of death, a mass shooting. 11,000 die a year and change, sometimes 12,000 from guns. Most of them are suicides. Then the next statistic, look it up, is cops shooting criminals. Then it's citizens shooting criminals. Way down there at the bottom is criminals shooting citizens. That's the truth. We're an armed society. And here it is from Breitbart. Obama goes beyond mere gun control, hints at confiscation. And then it's got his quotes here saying we need to do basically what our friends and allies have done, Great Britain, Australia, and others like it. And so he goes into talking about going beyond legislation. Shifting gears, talking about weapons in the hands of, quote, good guys. I'm not saying the Russians are perfect, but compared to ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they are the good guys. They're being attacked. Their only warm water port in the Mediterranean is being attacked. Syria is being attacked. They're being attacked by IS-type terrorists in Tajikistan and in other areas south of Russia, places like Chechnya. So the Russians have gone in and are actually targeting al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda, which is the command group of ISIS. And they're also targeting ISIS, and they're releasing the drone footage of those successful attacks taking place. Our government on record funded all the radical Islamists to go into that area. There are no moderate rebels. They're trying to turn Syria over to Saudi Arabia that already conquered Syria in the last century. So they've taken Syria before. Let's go to this article. Russian Air Force destroys terrorist command center, says the defense ministry, and releases the video and says that they have hit at least 20 times, 20 sorties against Islamic State. You can see the photos, the video, all of it. It should be American pilots there bombing Al-Qaeda. And of course, I made a big deal about this on Friday because it was a huge deal. I showed everybody Reuters reporting on it, where it openly admitted, Reuters, that al-Nusra is the name of Al-Qaeda in Syria, and that the Russians' first target they hit on Wednesday of last week with more than 30 attacks was al-Nusra command bases, and they actually said, which is an Al-Qaeda group. And so our government criticized Russia for striking Al-Qaeda. This is how upside down all of this has gotten 14 years after 9/11. But the truth is, we went after Iraq for 9/11 when Saudi Arabia has been proven to have been involved with our government. So they used the attacks of 9/11 to go after Iraq, to destabilize the whole Middle East, and then the very people involved in it are now have proxy wars taking over. Let's shift gears now out of that situation to something I warn pregnant women about all the time, because I know families this has happened to in Austin. I know families across the country that have told me about it and sent me their horror stories. About a third of the marijuana tests they give pregnant women turn out to be false positives. But so what if a woman has been smoking marijuana? Is it better to take their kids away from them? And now it's back in the news up on Infowars.com. New mothers tested for drugs without their consent by some Alabama hospitals. A woman who tested positive for drugs in a hospital can be arrested, and they take your children away. That's from AllGov. And you can go read that story at Infowars.com. And the reason I'm just bringing that in here is showing how there's a whole predator system. While the government ships in the majority of the drugs, the big banks launder the drug money, that women aren't being told when you go in to have a baby at a hospital, they're going to test you for more than 15 drugs, from prescription to illegal. And then they're going to ask you, do you have a prescription for this? Or why are you smoking marijuana? They're not reading you your rights. They're not telling you that they're working with the police, that they have a health department computer terminal, that they're entering all that data in. They're not telling you when they send your husband into the next room to fill out paperwork that when they ask you, you got enough money, honey? He treats you nice, honey? That they're about to put that in a health department report to send CPS to take your kids. Just like they announced if Social Security recipients direct transfer their money, they're now going to be declared incompetent and have their guns taken, even though they pressure you to do automatic wire transfer. This is the type of stuff that's just going on in this police state. And then finally, mothers don't have a right with their children to say no to vaccines, according to government, but TransAble, this is a serious story at Infowars.com with serious national television promoting it, about how wonderful it was that this woman wanted to be blind, and so she poured Drano in her eyes, and the psychologist helped pour it in her eyes, and it's so beautiful. And shouldn't taxpayers pay for people that are going to be on full disability because they had perfect sight and wanted to be blind? And now, if you have sight, does that hurt someone else's feelings? Because they say if you're transgendered, that someone being a father or a mother or a boy or a girl or he or she might hurt you because you're not a he or she, you're a whatever you think you are that day. Maybe a box, maybe a dog, maybe an Eiffel Tower, maybe an Easter bunny, maybe a Keebler elf, maybe a wombat. I don't know. It's just whatever you want. Everyone has to then follow your lead and do whatever you say, and oh my gosh, you're the boss. It's social control. But now, what if other people have sight and you don't? Should we gouge everyone's eyes out to make us equal? It's now reaching that insane point. When Jewel Shumping had a psychologist pour drain cleaner in her eyes to blind her, the reason she gave was precisely the same justification given by transgender people who have their genitals surgically removed. And of course, now the new move is make this taxpayer funded. You can go see the interview with her. We can play more of it coming up here in future reports. With a straight face, with straight news, like this is a good thing, and you're closed-minded if you don't accept it. You're not cool.
I went blind on purpose, but I don't feel it was a choice.
There you go. And then it's just how sexy, how cool. So we're given all these faux rights while our basic rights are being taken away. All right, that's it for this update report. Alex Jones signing off for now for Infowars.com. This is a hardcore globalist takeover to destabilize humanity. Wake up to it, get involved, say no to it, and continue to spread the word about alternative, independent media that transcends left and right and is just about preserving human dignity, human liberty, and empowering everybody. But to empower everybody, you got to have free will, you got to have some winners, some losers, and you got to have free association to choose in the free market what you like, what you believe, and then the great people together will vote through our actions to build a better world. That's the system I stand for. Free will, free association, the new Renaissance, 21st century and beyond.
And as you just heard from Alex Jones as he was reporting what has happened in the last couple of days, we've had now a major push from Obama trying to use the latest shooting to push for outright gun confiscation. And of course, they're also using it to push for a race war here within this country. I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the real war that is heating up in Syria. We're approaching something that is looking very much like the beginnings of a possible world war, what we've been concerned about for quite some time. We're seeing that not only in Syria, but also in the Ukraine. We're going to analyze what's going on there and what's behind it. As I was out last week, I was listening to Alex Jones's interview with Annie Jacobson and the book that she wrote about the history of DARPA. I listened to that interview, got me interested in the book, and on my drive home, I listened to the beginning of that book. It is an amazing book. You really need to get that, to educate yourself, to educate others about the history of the dark side of our government. You need to understand the character of our government. And I like the way that she takes it all the way back to the Cold War when she starts talking about the history of DARPA. It's not a cold documentary type of book. She has a lot of detail. She paints a very, very vivid picture, beginning with the first test of a hydrogen bomb, the fusion bomb. They were concerned they were going to set the atmosphere on fire because it fuses hydrogen atoms. They thought it might get uncontrolled, and actually, for a while, they thought it might. It was 2.5 times larger than they'd expected, so it scared them quite a bit. When they showed Eisenhower the radiation pattern, the intense radiation, they overlaid that radiation pattern over the northeastern United States, cities where I just was, following the Pope, Washington, New York, Philadelphia, showing that most of the people in those areas in that northeastern corridor would die from one hydrogen bomb just from the radiation just within a couple of hours. Many more people would die shortly after that. There was a lot of concern in the country at that time about what they could do for civil defense. So they had a hearing, and they had Senator Kefauver, who you might have heard of in many other contexts, but he had a hearing on what are you going to do about civil defense. And the man who got up and testified under oath said, well, we're going to build a few bunkers in the cities, but for the most part, we want people to try to get out of the city. And he said, well, what are they going to do when they get out of the city? Well, we recommend that they drive as far as they can, and then when they see the flash, they get out of their car and lie in a ditch on the side of the road and maybe cover themselves with something. And they could not believe what they were hearing. He then modified it and said, well, we've talked about possibly putting them in some long concrete tubes that we then might cover up with some dirt. It was absolutely ridiculous. And of course, we've had many instances of people looking at duck and cover, the nonsense that was put out, the propaganda films that our government put out in the 1960s to try to make people feel better. There was a cartoon that came out, I think, in the 80s from the UK, making fun of the civil defense preparations in Britain. It was an older couple. There was a nuclear war. They followed to the letter what they were told to do in the flyers from their government, and you watched them die slowly from radiation poisoning. That is what our government is concerned about. And, of course, at the same time, they were telling Eisenhower to sell this. Annie Jacobson talks about in her book, The Pentagon's Brain, she talks about how he was conflicted with this because he had seen the radiation patterns. He knew that all of this was total nonsense. There wasn't anything they were going to be able to do. The people who triggered the explosion on Bikini Island nearly died from radiation themselves. They were in a hardened facility. It had 10 feet of soil over 3-foot thick concrete walls, and the radiation was so high inside of that. They were miles away from ground zero. Radiation was so high, even in that preparation bunker, that they nearly died. So Eisenhower knew all this, and he was asked to sell this civil defense to the people at the same time. They had German scientists who came over from Operation Paperclip building bunkers inside of mountains for them that were essentially 1,000-foot thick concrete walls so that Eisenhower and or whoever was president could survive in a kind of Dr. Strangelove scenario. This is your compassionate government. This is the government that wants you to give up everything, all of your liberties. They want you to give up your guns because they're going to keep you safe because they care about you. No, they don't. Let me give you a couple of other examples. This just came out the last couple of days. Secret Service targeting of Representative Jason Chaffetz could give pause to other lawmakers. The Secret Service went after him because he investigated their incompetence. So they exposed him. Even Sensenbrenner, the lead author of the Patriot Act, has protested lax oversight of the National Security Agency's activities and this leak. So the lawmakers are very concerned about this because they realize that even if they question the Praetorian Guard that guards the president for incompetence, they themselves could become targets of blackmail. That's where this secret, dark government that answers no questions. That's why it's very important for you to understand the background of DARPA. It's important for you to understand the background of the NSA, to know that it was created by executive order by President Truman. And when they were questioned on it, on their abuses of what they did in the 1970s, we had the Church hearings. In the Senate, we had the Pike hearings in the House. And when Representative Pike asked the NSA, and of course this is a big deal to have the NSA even appear at a hearing, when he asked him, show me what your charter says you can do, because at that time they were spying on Americans illegally. The NSA director told him, I'm not going to show you the executive order that created us. And he was absolutely amazed. Congressman Pike said, we're giving you tens of billions of dollars a year and you won't even show us your charter? And he said, yes, that's the kind of dark secret government we have. Here's another example. Mint Press, blacked out pages. U.S. government snubs ACLU over targeted killing and a Freedom of Information request. They say the U.S. government gave the ACLU the equivalent of the middle finger in response to requests for records on the targeted killing program. An 8-page letter from the Director for National Intelligence, James Clapper. This is a guy who lied to Senator Wyden, saying that there was no surveillance of people just about a month before Ed Snowden released all of his documents. James Clapper released this 8-page letter to a couple of senators, the Republican Senator Chambliss and Democrat Senator Feinstein. And the 8 pages were completely blacked out except for one sentence at the bottom. It says, we hope this information has been helpful and we look forward to continuing to work with the committee on this bill. This is a kind of Orwellian doublespeak that is worthy of Terry Gilliam's Brazil, one of my favorite movies. But you know what? I don't like living in that kind of a movie. And that's the kind of movie we're living in. One more example. In 2013, the ACLU received a response on the Freedom of Information Act request for information from the FBI on how it interpreted law enforcement's requirements to get a search warrant to put a GPS device on a suspect's car. The FBI sent the ACLU 2 documents entirely blacked out. 110 pages of blacked out documents were returned in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. That is the kind of arrogance that we have from our government. And I'm going to give you some more examples of arrogance going after gun control, shooting up hospitals at the same time. Yes, that's our president, President Obama. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host today. We're going to talk about the shooting in Oregon. We're going to talk about how Obama is using it, surprise, surprise, to push gun control, but going a little bit farther. This time talking about gun confiscation, hinting very clearly at gun confiscation. We're going to talk about how the media spins this. We're going to talk about the reaction of various politicians running for president from both parties. And we're also going to talk about the mass shooting, killing spree of Barack Obama himself that just happened in the last day or so. Before we do, I want to let you know that Liver Shield is back in stock. We keep selling out of Liver Shield, and there's a really good reason for it. It uses a powerful blend of wild-crafted herbs, specifically formulated to support natural function and detoxification of the liver and the gallbladder. Try Liver Shield. Learn how to perform a liver flush at InfoWarsLife.com. This is a limited run. We keep selling out of it very often. As soon as we get it in, it sells out, and we have it in stock right now at InfoWarsLife.com. Let me read you a couple of reviews from people who leave reviews on our site. And again, that's a good way to see if the products are right for you. I like to read reviews at the bottom of products or books at Amazon before I purchase, whether I get it from Amazon or whether I get it from a local retailer. I like to get other people's responses when they use the product. This is what some people have said about Liver Shield. This is from MP Danella in Florida. He says, this product is exactly what it says it is. I would buy it again and again. The results are true. I even feel much better. I'm female, and I am not afraid to say so. In my 50s, had no idea I could feel this good. I would recommend this product to anyone. Do just as directed. You'll be shocked at the results. I eat right, exercise, and do it all, but I still needed this. Results proved it. She says, do it. Also from Carl in the UK, he says, this is hardcore detox stuff. I would advise anyone to read up on this. It works. And again, you can find out how to perform a liver flush at InfoWarsLife.com, and Liver Shield is now back in stock at InfoWarsLife.com. Now, some of the things that have come out of this shooting, first of all, this interesting article about one of the heroes that came out of this, Chris Mintz. There's a GoFundMe page for him, and it raised $500,000 in just 24 hours. Actually, since this article has been written, it's gone up another $223,000. It was $723,000 just before the show began when I last looked. From what I understand, of course, it's not really clear what happened there, but it appears from the narratives that I've seen that as the shooter was trying to get into another room, he tried to hold the door back. He was shot multiple times, various parts of his body. He was shot in his legs as well as, I think, his arms and hands, but he's going to have to learn how to walk all over again. If you want to try to help him, you can find the address for that GoFundMe project embedded in the article there, talking about how people are chipping in to help him. And again, this is a veteran. This is somebody who's been trained to respond quickly, to run to the sound of shots rather than running away, just like these people in the Paris train attack. Remember, it was a couple of months ago, maybe? I don't know if it was that long ago. Maybe it was just about a month ago, but there was a would-be shooter, got on a train, and there were a couple of vets there along with a British citizen, and they rushed the guy and subdued him before he was able to shoot other people on the train. One of them was injured. And the interesting thing is that one of these heroes from that Paris train potential attack, Alex Skarlatos, actually is an alumni of that same community college where this shooting just happened. He said, I would have tried to take him down, and that's precisely what the other veteran did. You know, we never know what's going to happen in our life, how we're going to respond. And it's interesting, many of us, I think, look at this and say, well, if somebody pointed a gun at you and you knew they were going to kill you, if you said you were a Christian, what would you say? I looked at that and it's, honestly, I don't know. I would say that I wouldn't deny Jesus, but Peter said that, and he did it anyway. You know, God's grace is big enough either way. But the main thing that I can't understand is why people wouldn't rush the shooter. I don't understand lining up and waiting. I wasn't there. I don't know all the details that people have said, but I simply don't understand not fighting back. Not trying to save your life, not trying to save other people's lives. So regardless of what you would do in that kind of a situation, I mean, my first response would not be to give an answer. My response would be to run at him. I would hope that if everybody were to run at him, at least some of the people would take him down. And that's essentially what is behind the idea of us having the ability and the will to protect ourselves. That's one of the reasons we have the Second Amendment. But the other reason we have the Second Amendment is as a check on government power. As I was just mentioning in the last segment, talking about the way the government reacted to the nuclear situation during the Cold War with Russia back in the 60s. Of course, there was the mutual assured destruction policy saying that, well, we're going to try to arm ourselves to the extent that there won't be a war. That was the way that they approached the Cold War. And quite frankly, the Second Amendment is really a mutual assured destruction pact as well. I've had many people say to me, you realize, of course, that you're not going to be able to stop the military with all of their equipment, the sophisticated, high firepower equipment that they have. You're not going to be able to stop them with your pistols. And I would always remind them of what happened in the Warsaw Ghetto. There you had a lot of people who were disarmed. Jews were lined up in the Warsaw Ghetto by the Nazis. They were guarded by the Nazis. And with a few hammers, they got one or two pistols and then began collecting arms from soldiers that they killed. And before long, you had an entire panzer division that was pinned down by citizens who had the will to resist. That was what they needed, was the will. If you have the will, you will find the tools. Firearms are simply tools. And the only way they could put down that rebellion, even with a couple of panzer divisions, was to burn the entire city to the ground. We saw that recreated at Waco a few decades later on exactly the same day, April the 19th. So understand that we may not win wars, but our government, even with all of its firepower, has never won an asymmetric war since World War II. They've never won an asymmetric war. They will admit it to you. And that's what we need to understand. It is a deterrence to tyranny. You don't have to have a fighting war. And we hope that doesn't happen, just as we had always hoped through the Cold War there would not be a nuclear exchange. It truly is a nuclear option, but it has to be there. That's why the founders of our country created the Second Amendment as a deterrence to tyranny. If you don't have it, what do you think is going to happen? When I looked at the headlines, and actually I saw USA Today paper, a physical paper. I look at USA Today online all the time, but it had been a long time since I saw the paper. I was on vacation. The headline said something to the effect, mass shooting at school, ... again. And when I looked at that, I thought, does USA Today do that when we have yet another case of police brutality? Do they put police nearly kill or do kill someone who is in handcuffs again? Do you really want to have the government be the only ones who have access to weapons? Do you want them to have a total monopoly on force? I don't want to see a situation like that. Take a look at this article that is on Infowars.com. Cops rupture handcuffed man's spleen. They laugh at him. They take pictures as he lay dying and begging. This is a police sergeant and an officer. They were finally fired 14 months after surveillance video caught the officer violently kneeing a handcuffed man after rupturing the man's spleen. The officers ignored his pleas for medical attention for nearly hours while laughing at him off camera, later lying to investigators regarding the incident. Let's play a little bit of a clip of that. Oh, we'll do that when we come back. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to play a little bit of a clip of that for you. And I want you to understand, just as the Greeks said about power, a fish rots from the head down. And of course, we see this government corruption in Washington starting there and corrupting the police at the local level. That's what we have to be aware of, and that's what we have to push back. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I want to get back to the shooting in Oregon, how it's being used. Of course, it's being used to start up a race war. Obama is implying that he wants to go to gun confiscation. I want to talk about that, but before I do, real quickly, we have Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine now in stock at InfoWarsLife.com. It's my #1 pick for you and your family. It's always been super high-quality nascent iodine. It's a great nutrient supplement that you need in your life. You need to have iodine. They've taken it out of your food. This is a way that you can make sure that you are getting the amount of iodine that your body needs each day. I take it every day, and I'm stocking up on it now while it's in stock. It's ultra clean, ultra powerful, derived from our limited supply of deep earth crystals. Plus, it funds our operation. It's a win across the board. A win-win situation. As Alex says, it's a 360 win. Get your X2 Nascent Iodine at InfoWarsLife.com while supplies last. And again, we do have that in stock right now. I want to go back to this article that was up on InfoWars.com about the cop rupturing a handcuffed man's spleen, laughing at him, delaying calling for medics. And this was all over a $60 bar tab that he was unable to pay. So the guy was arrested. They roughed him up, kicked him as he was handcuffed. They kicked him in the stomach. They say he was upset and injured after they left him handcuffed inside of a jail cell. He then headbutted the glass window on the cell door. And then we have this surveillance video. I want to play a little bit of this for you.
This is what happened to 40-year-old Robert Lease last August after being arrested by OPD for leaving a bar without paying for his drink. Lease's lawyer says after Lease headbutts the holding cell window, catching his cap in the crack, Orlando officer Peter Delio slammed Lease with a knee strike so forceful it ruptured his spleen and an artery.
Let me help you. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. Yeah, you are. Get up, scumbag. You want to be a tough guy? Breaking for no reason?
Okay, so you can see that in what they're describing. For those of you who are listening on the radio, they're basically throwing him around. After kneeing him, they throw him around, they say, like a rag doll, it says in the article. Then they delayed calling the medics when they came in. They misdirected the medics, and you can watch this video if you look at the article on Infowars.com. So here's the situation. They were suspended for a week without pay. Finally, in March, they were arrested and charged with felony battery. This is why we have to have videos. This is why we need to watch the police. But we need to also understand that these kinds of rules, this kind of engagement with the police, this kind of bullying that goes unpunished is what is corrupting our police departments. And it's being encouraged from Washington. When we looked at what happened in New Mexico with the shooting of the homeless man that drew attention to a lot of this. This is one of the first shootings, I think, that really captured a lot of people's imagination. Of course, this is going on continuously. Obama says he's kind of become routine to see school shootings. Well, they're not nearly as routine as police shootings, let me tell you, or police beatings. What is driving this? A new curriculum was being taught at the New Mexico State Police Academy. And a guy who had been an instructor there for a very long time says, I refuse to teach this. This is a shoot-first curriculum. I'm not going to teach people to shoot first. That's what the federal government wants done, though. And that's what they are pushing. They're also pushing a war, a race war. We have this article that's up on the Drudge Report today. CNN turns the mixed-race Oregon shooter into a white man. And, of course, the L.A. Times also claims that he's a white supremacist. The CNN did not show photos of his mother, who is black. They showed pictures of his father, and they lightened the picture up. If you look at that article, you can see both of the pictures. You can see how they pulled the color levels up there in Photoshop to turn the man white. Absolutely amazing. They say that CNN correspondent Pamela Brown said that he had, quote, rambled about his hatred towards black men, thus portraying him as a racist or a possible white supremacist. The L.A. Times also portrayed him as a white supremacist. They say a note that he left behind suggested that he supported white supremacist causes and opposed organized religion. There we go. And yet you see that where we had the shooting in Virginia, the racial undertones on that were completely ignored. They focused instead on gun control. They didn't focus on the fact that he had followed the narrative from Obama, from Black Lives Matter, from the Southern Poverty Law Center. They didn't pay any attention to that whatsoever. They focused strictly on pushing gun control. And now we've got the father of that reporter in Virginia who was shot. He's now using his daughter's death to make himself a Democrat Party celebrity, pushing gun control. His name is Andy Parker, and he put out a USA Today editorial that says the Oregon shooting shows that we are at war. Now, he's saying that they're at war with the NRA. But no, this is a race war. This is a cultural war. This is a political war of divide and conquer that is created by Obama, by the media, by the Southern Poverty Law Center, by Black Lives Matter, that is funded by George Soros. That is the kind of war that they are pushing. You know, wars are preceded by propaganda, and that's precisely what they have done. When I was in Oregon, we were on vacation, and we were in Portland, Oregon. We went to it was an old elementary school that had been transformed into a hotel and a restaurant, and we were just walking through looking at what they had done. It was kind of interesting architecturally. And so we were walking the halls. I heard a presentation that was going on in a room there, and I heard all of these Southern Poverty Law Center talking points. And I stopped, and I walked over there, and I took a little bit of video, and I just kind of looked to see what they were talking about. And up on the projector behind the speaker, this was the title of the event that they had there, The Resurgence of Hate Crimes in America, Charleston and Beyond. And, of course, they were talking about the white shooter in Charleston that went in and shot the black Christians in a church, sat there and prayed with them for a while, and then shot them. But it was 1 week after this Virginia shooting. Did they talk at all about Vester Flanagan? No. There was not anything said about Vester Flanagan. Let me read you some of the stuff. I've got, you can get a shot of this. I took photographs of their flyer. This was a thing called Race Talks. Let me give you some of the topics that these people put out in Race Talks. This is something that's run by a church that's in the local area, a liberal church. Some of these, learning to be white. That was one of their topics before this. Another one, Islam, a religion of peace. And again, the resurgence of hate crimes in America, Charleston and beyond, talking about some very obscure cases that I was not even aware of, but completely ignoring the situation in Virginia where we were given a shooter manifesto that said he was attacking these people because they were racist, because they were white. And, of course, that is precisely what they are teaching in these race talks. They want to say that, the cross-cultural adoption and African-American hair care. Now, that's fine. That's fine. I have friends. It wasn't possible for us to adopt a black child 30, 40 years ago. We tried in North Carolina. They wouldn't do it. I now have some friends who have done that. I'm in favor of that. I think that's a great idea. There's so many children who are locked up in the system who can't get out, especially black children, because their parents, many of them, have been locked up in this insane war on drugs. I'm not saying that the children should be given to the parents if they're addicts, but I also know that there are a lot of people who are locked away in mandatory minimum sentences because of possession of marijuana, something that doesn't necessarily threaten anyone. Nevertheless, what they're selling here is the narrative of white privilege. White people are evil. Only white people can be racist. And that's precisely what we're hearing from the media. And they're ignoring the war against white people that we saw with this shooter in Virginia. Instead, we hear from this Oregon shooter's dad. He says, quote, "That's what guns are, the killers." He said the guns are the killers. You understand, guns are inanimate objects, okay? They don't run out and shoot people, okay? We need to have an investigation of this guy's background, and we need to maybe we do need to change some of the gun laws. Maybe we need to make some of the parents civilly liable if they're unwilling to take any responsibility for the actions of their children, as this parent is. You got this Oregon shooter. He's the father of this guy, but he's not responsible for anything. No, an inanimate object is responsible. And we should take the firearms from people who have used them to protect their families. We should take firearms from people who are law-abiding citizens who haven't harmed anyone. But we shouldn't allow the guns are the issue, okay? He says, don't buy guns, don't buy guns, don't buy guns. 3 times he said guns are the killers. No, you need to take some personal responsibility, especially if you're the dad of a mass killer. And we need to look to see what this guy's background was. He was being treated for psychological issues, and that is what we have seen as the underlying cause. SSRIs. Do background checks on those. Register people who get SSRIs. They're the ones who do mass murder, suicide. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host today. We're going to talk about Obama's hinting at gun control, actually at confiscation, way beyond gun control. Now they're hinting at confiscation. We also have this article that came out at New American. Is a creepy new U.S. Army patch a pro-Islamic symbol? If you look at this picture, it's absolutely amazing. On the one side, they have crossed scimitars in a circle that is actually the emblem